The air in V.O. Sophia's house had a special scent on Christmas Eve, a scent that clung to your clothes and danced in your nostrils long after you'd left. It was a warm, sweet perfume, a mixture of the cinnamon from the rabanadas just coming out of the sizzling oil, their sugary surfaces glistening under the kitchen's fluorescent light, and the faint, almost imperceptible smell of old wood from the furniture that had been in the family for generations. Outside, the relentless December sun of Rio de Janeiro had finally given way to a slightly cooler evening breeze that whispered through the open windows, carrying with it the distant sounds of the city preparing for the night's festivities. The cheerful cacophony of street vendors hawking their wares, the intermittent pop of a firecracker, and the faint, rhythmic pulse of a faraway samba. Inside, the house was a symphony of sensory experiences. The floor, a dark, polished wood, was cool underfoot, a welcome respite from the day's oppressive heat. The Christmas tree, an artificial pine that had seen better days, stood proudly in the corner of the living room, its branches laden with a chaotic but charming collection of ornaments. There were delicate glass baubles that caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the walls, handmade felt creations from school projects long past, and strings of multicolored lights that blinked in a slightly frantic, offbeat rhythm, casting a warm, almost magical glow on everything they touched. The blinking lights painted fleeting patterns on the faces of the family members gathered in the room, their voices a low, happy hum that filled the space with a palpable sense of love and belonging. The gentle whir of the ceiling fan overhead provided a steady, comforting rhythm to the evening, its blades slowly stirring the warm, fragrant air. 8-year-old Leo was sitting cross-legged on the floor, the rough texture of the woven rug imprinting a temporary pattern on his bare legs. He was meticulously arranging the figures of the nativity scene, the Principio, that his avu had set up on a small table next to the tree. The figures were old, made of painted ceramic, and some of them bore the scars of Christmases past. A chipped ear on one of the sheep, a shepherd with a missing hand, a king whose painted-on beard was starting to fade. Leo didn't mind the imperfections. To him, they were just part of the story. He could almost hear the gentle bleating of the sheep, the low murmur of the shepherds, the reverent silence of the kings as they gathered around the tiny, ceramic baby Jesus. He carefully placed the last king, the one with the chipped crown, a little closer to the manger, his small fingers surprisingly gentle with the fragile figure. He could feel the smooth, cool ceramic under his fingertips, a stark contrast to the rough wool of the rug. His older sister, 14-year-old Sophia, named after their grandmother, was lounging on the sofa, her long legs draped over the armrest. She was scrolling through her phone, the screen casting a cool, blue light on her face, but she wasn't completely absorbed. Every now and then, she would look up, a small smile playing on her lips as she watched her younger brother's serious concentration, or as she listened to the familiar, comforting sounds of her family around her. The sofa's worn velvet was soft and familiar against her skin, the same sofa she had spent countless hours on, reading, napping, and listening to her avuess stories. She could hear the rhythmic clinking of ice cubes in glasses from the kitchen, the sizzle of something delicious frying on the stove, and the low, melodious murmur of her mother and her tia talking, their laughter occasionally bubbling up and spilling into the living room. The air was thick with the smells of Christmas dinner being prepared, the rich, savory aroma of the Peru de Natal, the Christmas turkey, roasting in the oven, its skin slowly turning a perfect golden brown, the sweet, comforting scent of the farofa, a mixture of cassava flour, bacon, and olives being toasted on the stovetop, and the sharp, tangy smell of the tropical fruits that adorned the dessert table. Vo Sophia, the heart and soul of the family, was in the kitchen, her domain. Her hands, though wrinkled and spotted with age, moved with a practiced grace and efficiency that was mesmerizing to watch. She was a whirlwind of activity, her movements a blur of color and motion against the backdrop of the white-tiled kitchen walls. She wore a brightly colored apron over her simple cotton dress, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun at the nape of her neck. Her face, etched with the lines of a life well lived, was flushed from the heat of the stove, and her eyes, the color of warm honey, sparkled with a mixture of love and gentle amusement as she watched her family. She moved between the stove and the counter, her bare feet making a soft, shuffling sound on the cool tile floor. She hummed a traditional Christmas carol, Noit Feliz, her voice a low, soothing melody that wove itself into the tapestry of the evening's sounds. The clatter of pots and pans, the rhythmic chop of a knife on a wooden cutting board, the hiss of the pressure cooker, all these were the sounds of her love, the symphony of her affection for her family. Leo's father, Ricardo, and his Tio, Marcos, were on the small balcony, leaning against the railing and looking out at the city lights that were beginning to twinkle to life as darkness fell. The air on the balcony was cooler, carrying the scent of the ocean and the faint, smoky smell of a distant churrasco. They were talking in low, conspiratorial tones, their voices a soft rumble that was barely audible above the sounds of the city. Every now and then, a gust of wind would rustle the leaves of the potted plants on the balcony, their leaves whispering secrets to the night. Ricardo took a long, slow sip of his beer, the cold glass a welcome shock against his warm hand. He could feel the condensation trickling down his fingers, a small, cool river in the palm of his hand. He looked at his brother, his face illuminated by the warm glow of the Christmas lights from the living room, and a feeling of deep, quiet contentment washed over him. This was Christmas. This was family. Later, as the evening wore on and the last of the rabanadas had been devoured, their sugary sweetness lingering on everyone's tongues, Vos Sofia gathered the children around the Christmas tree. The room was quieter now, the earlier boisterous energy having subsided into a warm, comfortable silence. The only sounds were the gentle whir of the fan, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, and the occasional crackle of the tinsel on the tree as a stray breeze from the window made it dance. The air was filled with a sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement that always preceded the opening of the gifts. The presents were piled under the tree, a colorful mountain of wrapping paper and ribbons. Some were large and awkwardly shaped, their contents a mystery, while others were small and neat, their crisp corners and perfectly tied bows hinting at the care with which they had been wrapped. The children's eyes were wide with a mixture of excitement and awe as they gazed at the pile of gifts, their faces illuminated by the twinkling lights of the tree. Vos Sofia sat down on a low stool, the creak of the old with a familiar sound in the quiet room. She looked at her grandchildren, her heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost took her breath away. She had a special gift for each of them, something she had chosen with great care, something that she hoped would be more than just a toy or a piece of clothing, but a memory, a piece of her love that they could carry with them always. She reached under the tree and pulled out a small, simply wrapped package. It was wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with a piece of red string. There was no fancy bow, no glittery wrapping paper, just a simple, unadorned package that seemed to hold a secret. She held it in her lap for a moment, her fingers tracing the outline of the object inside. It was small and soft, and she could feel the familiar weight of it in her hands. She took a deep breath, the scent of pine and old paper filling her lungs, and then she began to speak, her voice a low, gentle murmur that drew the children closer. "This," she said, her voice filled with a quiet emotion, "is a very special gift. It's a gift that has been waiting for a very long time to be given." The soft rustle of the brown paper was the only sound in the room as Vos Sofia carefully unwrapped the gift, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were handling something incredibly precious. The children leaned in closer, their eyes wide with curiosity, the twinkling Christmas lights reflecting in their dark pupils like tiny, captured stars. Sophia, despite her teenage nonchalance, had put her phone aside, her attention fully captured by the quiet drama unfolding before her. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and something else, something faint and dusty, like a long-forgotten memory. Finally, the last layer of paper was peeled away, revealing a small, well-worn teddy bear. It was a simple bear, made of a dark brown, almost chocolate-colored material that was worn smooth in places, especially around the ears and the tips of its paws. Its fur, which might have once been soft and fluffy, was now matted and thin, the underlying fabric showing through in patches. One of its eyes, a black glass bead, was missing, leaving a small, dark hole in its place. The other eye, however, stared out at the world with a surprising amount of character, its shiny surface reflecting the colorful lights of the Christmas tree. Its nose and mouth were stitched on with thick, black thread, the stitches uneven and slightly crooked, a clear indication that they had been done by hand. The bear was small enough to fit in the palm of Vos Sofia's hand, and it looked incredibly fragile, as if it might crumble to dust at the slightest touch. Leo reached out a tentative hand, his fingers hovering just above the bear's head. "He's old," he said, his voice a soft whisper. He could feel the warmth radiating from his grandmother's hand as she held the bear, a warmth that seemed to be infused into the very fabric of the old toy. Vos Sofia smiled, a sad, sweet smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, meu anjo," she said, her voice a little thick with emotion. "He is very old. Older than me, even." She gently placed the bear in Leo's outstretched hands. The bear was surprisingly heavy for its size, and its body was firm, almost hard, a far cry from the soft, squishy toys Leo was used to. He could feel the faint, crunchy texture of the stuffing inside, a strange sensation against his soft palms. The bear's one good eye seemed to be looking right at him, a silent observer of the scene. Sophia leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "Where did you get him, Vo?" she asked, her voice soft. Sophia's gaze drifted to a point somewhere beyond the Christmas tree, her eyes clouded with memories. "He was my brother's," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "My older brother, Joao." The name hung in the air, a name the children had heard only a few times before, always spoken in hushed tones, always followed by a moment of silence. Sophia rarely spoke of her brother, and the children knew that his story was a sad one. She took a deep breath, the scent of the Christmas tree and the faint, dusty smell of the bear filling her lungs. "Joao was a few years older than me," she began, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "He was a quiet boy, but he had a big heart. He loved to draw, and he was always creating little stories and characters in his notebooks. He was my best friend, my protector." She paused, her fingers gently stroking the bear's worn ear. "This bear," she continued, her voice trembling slightly, "was his most prized possession. He got it for Christmas when he was 6 years old, and he named him Artur. He took Artur everywhere with him. He told him all his secrets, all his dreams. Artur was his constant companion, his silent confidant." Leo looked down at the bear in his hands, a new sense of reverence for the old toy filling him. He could almost imagine his great-uncle, a boy he had never met, whispering his secrets into the bear's furry ear. He could feel the weight of those secrets, the weight of a life he had never known, in the small, worn-out toy. Sophia's eyes were glistening with unshed tears, but she continued her story, her voice steady and clear. "When Joao was 10, he got sick. It was a bad sickness, a fever that wouldn't go away. The doctors did everything they could, but he didn't get better." Her voice broke, and a single tear traced a path down her wrinkled cheek. She quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand, but another one soon followed. The room was silent, the only sound the soft, rhythmic blinking of the Christmas lights. The air was heavy with a shared sadness, a sense of loss for a person they had never known, but whose presence was suddenly, tangibly felt in the room. Leo held the bear a little tighter, his small hands a protective shield around the fragile toy. "The night before he left us," Sophia continued, her voice choked with emotion, "he gave me Artur. He told me to take care of him, to keep him safe. He said that as long as I had Artur, a part of him would always be with me." She looked at Leo, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and love. "And I have," she whispered. "I've kept him safe all these years. He's been my secret, my comfort, my connection to my brother." She reached out and gently touched the bear in Leo's hands. "And now," she said, her voice a little stronger, "I want you to have him. I want you to take care of him, to love him, to tell him your secrets and your dreams. I want you to know that you have a guardian angel watching over you, a great uncle who would have loved you more than words can say." Leo looked up at his grandmother, his own eyes now filled with tears. He didn't know what to say. He was holding more than just a toy in his hands. He was holding a piece of his family's history, a symbol of a love that had transcended time and loss. He looked down at the bear, at its one good eye, and he felt a strange connection to the boy who had loved it so many years ago. He felt a sense of responsibility, a promise to keep the bear safe, to honor the memory of the great uncle he had never known. He carefully placed the bear on the rug in front of him, its small, worn body a stark contrast to the bright, new toys he had been hoping for. But in that moment, the old, one-eyed teddy bear was the most precious gift in the world. The rest of the evening passed in a gentle, almost reverent haze. The other presents were opened, of course, their bright, cheerful wrapping paper a stark contrast to the simple brown paper that had enveloped Artur. Leo received a new soccer ball, its black and white hexagonal panels still stiff and smelling of fresh plastic. Sophia got a new pair of headphones, their sleek, modern design a world away from the old-fashioned simplicity of the teddy bear. There were clothes, books, and other toys, each one met with a chorus of oohs and ahs and grateful thank yous. But even as the pile of discarded wrapping paper grew, and the room filled with the sounds of new toys being played with, there was a quiet, unspoken understanding that the most important gift of the night was the small, one-eyed bear that now sat perched on the arm of the sofa, a silent observer of the family's Christmas celebration. Later that night, Long after the last of the guests had gone home and the house had settled into a comfortable silence, Leo lay in his bed, the sound of the ceiling fan a gentle, rhythmic whir in the darkness. The air was cool now, the earlier heat of the day a distant memory. The only light in the room came from the street lamp outside, its soft, yellow glow filtering through the thin curtains and casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. He was tucked under a thin sheet, the fabric cool and smooth against his skin. He could hear the distant, muffled sounds of the city, the occasional honk of a car, the faint strains of music from a neighbor's house. But in his room, everything was still and quiet. He had placed Artur on the pillow next to him, the old bear's small, firm body a comforting presence in the darkness. He reached out a hand and gently touched the bear's worn fur, the texture rough and familiar under his fingertips. He could feel the hard, round shape of the one remaining glass eye, the uneven stitches of the nose and mouth. He thought about his great-uncle, Joao, a boy he had only just learned about, but who he already felt a deep connection to. He tried to imagine what Joao was like, what he looked like, what his voice sounded like. He pictured a boy with dark, curly hair and kind eyes, a boy who loved to draw and who whispered his secrets to his beloved teddy bear. He closed his eyes and, in the quiet darkness of his room, he began to whisper his own secrets to Artur. He told him about his dreams of becoming a famous soccer player, about his fear of the dark, about the girl in his class who he had a secret crush on. He told him about his hopes and his fears, his triumphs and his failures. He poured his heart out to the little bear, his voice a soft, steady murmur in the quiet room. And as he spoke, he felt a strange sense of comfort, a feeling that he was not alone, that someone was listening, someone who understood. He felt the presence of his great-uncle, a gentle, loving presence that seemed to fill the room with a sense of peace and belonging. The next morning, the sun streamed through the window, painting a bright, cheerful pattern on the floor. Leo woke up slowly, the events of the previous night feeling like a dream. But then he saw Artur, sitting on the pillow next to him, his one good eye seeming to sparkle in the morning light. He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. He picked up the bear and held him close, the old toy a tangible link to a past he was only just beginning to understand. From that day on, Artur became Leo's constant companion. He took him everywhere, just as his great-uncle had done so many years before. Artur sat on his desk while he did his homework, a silent, encouraging presence. He was tucked into his backpack when he went to school, a secret friend hidden amongst his books and pencils. He sat on the sidelines during his soccer games, a loyal, one-eyed fan cheering him on. Leo told Artur everything, his joys and his sorrows, his hopes and his dreams. The little bear became his confidant, his protector, his best friend. Sophia, who had at first been a little skeptical of her brother's sudden attachment to the old, tattered bear, soon came to understand the significance of the gift. She would often find Leo talking to Artur, his voice a low, serious murmur, and she would smile a soft, knowing smile. She saw how the bear had changed her brother, how it had given him a new sense of confidence, a new sense of connection to his family and his past. She even started to feel a strange affection for the one-eyed bear herself, a sense of gratitude for the comfort and companionship it had brought to her little brother. Years passed, and Christmases came and went. The artificial tree in Sophia's living room was eventually replaced with a new one, its branches fuller and its lights brighter. The old, chipped nativity figures were carefully packed away and replaced with a new, more modern set. But one thing remained the same. Every Christmas Eve, Artur, the old, one-eyed teddy bear, would be given a place of honor on the mantelpiece, a silent, watchful guardian of the family's Christmas celebration. He was a reminder of a love that had never died, a love that had been passed down through generations, a love that was, and always would be, the most priceless gift of all. One Christmas, when Leo was a young man, he brought his own family to Sophia's house for the traditional Christmas Eve celebration. His wife, a kind, gentle woman with a warm smile, and his young son, a rambunctious little boy with his father's dark, curly hair, were immediately welcomed into the fold, their laughter and joy adding a new layer to the symphony of family sounds that filled the house. After dinner, as the family gathered around the Christmas tree, Leo disappeared for a moment and then returned with a small, simply wrapped package. He sat down next to his son, who was looking at the pile of presents under the tree with wide, excited eyes. "I have a very special gift for you," Leo said, his voice a little thick with emotion. He carefully unwrapped the package, revealing Artur, the old, one-eyed teddy bear. The bear was even more worn now, its fur almost completely gone in some places, It's one good eye a little duller than it used to be. But to Leo, it was still the most beautiful, most precious object in the world. He told his son the story of the bear, the story of his great-great-uncle Joao, a boy he had never met but whose spirit lived on in the small, tattered toy. He told him about the love and the loss, the memories and the hope, that were all wrapped up in the simple, one-eyed bear. And as he placed the bear in his son's small hands, he felt a sense of peace, a sense of continuity, a sense that the love that had been passed down to him was now being passed down to a new generation. He looked at his son, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of wonder and awe as he held the old, worn-out bear, and he knew, with a certainty that filled his heart with a deep, quiet joy, that the old teddy bear had once again become the most priceless gift of all.